Welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to talk about how to grow another popular edible, another popular plant that we can eat. So we have talked about growing rosemary, we have talked about growing thyme, we have talked about growing sage. Right? So these are very popular plants that most people like to grow, right? Especially for the beginners. So today we are going to talk about another very commonly used plant, right? A kind of vegetable, you can say that, especially in Asian dishes, and that is spring onions, right? The spring onions. So the easiest way to grow spring onion is to grow from the bulbs, right? These small little green onions that you can buy in almost any supermarket. You can buy it from any wet market or any kind of grocery shops, right? Grocery stores, they will have it, right? And the good thing about spring onions is that they grow pretty fast, and you get to harvest them within like a month or a few weeks time, right? If you have the right growing environment and the growing conditions, right? So how can we use the grow method, right? How can we use the grow method to find out how to grow them well? Yes, you can, but there's a challenge, right? There is, in fact, very little information about the natural habitat of spring onions, right? Many reasons, right? One, because it's a highly cultivated plant for so many years, decades, right? People have figured out exactly how to grow it to maximize the yield, right? And you won't get a lot of good information about the wild ones. The spring onion in the wild, that is a lot harder to find. Right. Second is because of the search results that will return you. Right. The Google will return you very irrelevant information because there are just too many information. There's too much information on spring onions. Right. There's no good way to find out their natural habitat. So here's what I did. Right. So instead of googling for photos of plants in the wild, I look for articles. Right. I look for articles about the spring onions. But even then, it is actually pretty hard, right? The information that I got will be like, they are found growing in fields. And I think that is good enough for a start. So I even look at, photos of relative of spring onions, right? Other kinds of spring onions that we don't eat. I see how they grow in the wild. So we can apply the grow method, right, based on this information, and then we can find out and replicate the 5 growing conditions in our garden, right, so that they can grow to their full potentials when you have all these 5 growing conditions right. So let's get started. So they are found naturally in fields, right? So if you search online, you will find photos of farms growing spring onions out in the open fields, right? They are grown out in the open field. You can see the photos very, very clearly. So the first condition, that is light. So spring onions, they are best grown under direct sunlight. So the more sunlight you have, the better it is. So try to give them probably 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight, right? Meaning they are fully exposed to the sun. Right, so I did try to grow them with just 4 hours of direct sunlight at my balcony, right? And just bright light throughout the day. Well, they can still be grown, right? They are very hardy plants. They can be grown in lower light conditions, but they are growing a lot slower and they are not as fragrant. So the more light they get, the better they are, and you can get more fragrance of the spring onions. So next, how about water? Right, so though we don't find any good information about spring onions in the wild, but we know that sun-loving plants generally takes up a lot more water. Right, that's because sun-loving plants, they have a lot of light, and therefore they need a lot of water. They need a lot more water for photosynthesis to produce food for them. Right, so I always try to keep the soil moist at all times. Not really wet, just moist. You touch it, right? If it's dry, then it's time to water, right? Keep it moist. So next condition, that is humidity. Well, out in the field means that they have full exposure to the elements, right? So they have full exposure to the wind. Right, so I wouldn't be overly concerned about humidity for spring onions. And for the shape of the leaves, right, you can see that they don't lose water that easily. Right, so I would consider them that they are pretty hardy. They are not particularly affected by humidity. So lower humidity, that is fine, but just maintain just not too windy. I think that would be good. Right, for potting media, I think that's the next condition that we look at. And given its very fast growth, right, it's a vegetable, if you can call it, right, and they have these high water requirements, right? A nutrient-rich soil or nutrient-rich potting media that retains water will be essential. So I will grow them in a regular garden soil, right? Or potting media with, equal parts of compost and burn earth, and maybe, top up a little bit more compost, right? So the last growing condition that in the grow method, that is feeding. So, but really there is no need to feed actually, right? Because they are very fast growers, you can harvest them within a month. You don't need to feed. But if you are reusing the soil again, right, you want to reuse, you want to plant new spring onions, then you need to replenish the nutrients. So I would recommend, adding a little bit more compost, right? Whenever you harvest and you put in a new crop, right, you put in more compost, right? Or you can add slow release fertilizer like those granules, right, osmocote or something else, right, to re-fertilize, to re-energize, to replenish the nutrients in the soil. So there you go, 5 growing conditions, right, even with very limited information online. Right, spring onions, they are pretty easy to grow. They are probably one of the easiest plant to grow, and they can be grown on your balcony or on the sun or in a sunny spot in your garden or even by the window. So it's a great plant for beginners to try, right? And it's also a great plant, a very educational plant to teach your kids how to grow these small little onions into spring onions. So simply buy the bulbs, right? You can just buy the bulbs, you just plant them not too deep in the soil, that you just cover the top of the, just leave the tip exposed. I think that would be good enough. Right? And you can get to harvest them within a few weeks. So go and try it out and have some fun. Right? If you want to learn more about the grow method, make sure you click on the link below. Download my ebook, and my ebook on the grow method. You'll find step by step everything you need to know on how do you use the grow method well and implement in your own gardening. So enjoy your gardening, and I will see you soon.